Welcome to another Node-RED video in my channel, and this is going to be probably the fourth or the fifth episode of this automation engine where I built a general purpose routine where I can create conditions and then also when those conditions are met configure some actions that I want the system to do. So simple things like if the light level drops outside, then it should be considered as nighttime, so the rollers, the blinds should come down, and then maybe some light should come up in the garden. And also if the the consumption of the washing machine goes up, then the washing machine is running, and then if it goes down again, then the washing machine stops, so I should get a notification. So I have lots of these codes all around Node-RED, and I wanted to centralize them in a central thing. So I have done probably 2 videos on the actual logic, how it works and how things are defined, and and that has been running for a couple of months. Everything was fine with that, but I wanted to have some sort of like UI where I can monitor and I can make some changes to it. So in the last live couple of months ago, I started to work on this UI editor that you can see here. Well, actually there was one where I started to do the same thing in UI builder, but then dashboard 2.0 came out, so I started to work on this dashboard 2.0 user interface for that, and I started doing that in live, and then now it's done. Well, it's almost done, so I wanted to cover it now. So in this video I'm going to mostly talk about how what I did to make this final version work, and I'm going to link all the other videos, so it's going to be in the cards if you want to go through them. But it's been a long thing. I probably must have started working on the rule engine probably about a year ago. Okay, so let's see how it looks like. So first of all, just to summarize again, so I have a set of rules that you can see here, and then each rule has conditions and then it has actions, and the conditions usually compare either a state or it compares a value that comes from a sensor or something. And then that action can be, setting a state, just like implementing a simple state machine, or sending a notification, doing a control, which control can do anything, send a notification, turn on lights, lower the blinds, whatever. So what you can see here, well, let me just give you an example. So that washing machine notification takes 2 rules to implement. So first of all, if the washing machine power goes above 1500 watts and if the washing machine state is idle, then I consider the state as washing because the washing machine is running, and at that point I would monitor when the power consumption drops again below 2 watts, so that's that. And if the washing machine state is washing, then I set the state to idle, and then I do a control, which is washing underscore power complete, washing underscore complete equals 1, and that in the code will just send a notification to me. And I've done pretty much the same with the night time and the when the plants are dry and when the plants are watered, and it also does a reminder. So I've covered this in the previous videos. So that has a nice user interface now. As you can see, you can, whenever you click on any of the conditions or the actions, the editor comes up and it auto populates the values. I also have a data list, so that just shows me everything which is fed into the automation engine. Do I call it? Yeah, I call it automation engine. And yeah, so these could be either sensor values like the washing machine power, or it can be these states that I create set using the rules, for example here. So I just consider them as just another data point which doesn't come from actual sensors, but is set by one of the rules. And everything is getting logged by this engine. So I have a list of logs, which is just like, well, at the moment I'm just getting log notifications that this test rule, which I've created here, is disabled, so it just doesn't need to be executed or evaluated. And then I also have a summary how many times each of these actions triggered. And I think I probably set the I should get some other messages. I'm not sure why they are not coming, but might have set the log level to a certain value. Yeah, by the way, there is also like a settings object for this automation engine, which controls like log levels and some of the other things. So it is working now, and it is missing a couple of things. For example, there is no validation at the moment, so I can just put anything here, and I can put something here in the operand which doesn't really exist here. So there is no notification, there's nothing like that at the moment. And I've implemented deleting conditions and actions, but I haven't implemented adding anything there or adding a new rules. So I can just move the rules around. I can enable, disable them. For example, I cannot set this test rule either. So again, that's, you know, 2 more screen which I didn't do yet. And as I said, there is a whole set of settings for this, you know, rule engine. And yeah, it has a rule store and it has a log level. There's not much, but yeah, I thought maybe I can include that at some point as well somewhere. But yeah, up until now I was using this by, you know, setting the rules here in a big JSON, but now I can edit them as well. Probably I should I should probably set this rule store to file, so it gets, all my changes get actually saved instead of you know, injecting the default ones from this node, which this is how it worked up until now. Okay, so those are the new things which I might or might not do in the future. And but anyway, you would have the current version that is going to be, you know, downloadable in the video description. One thing which was a little bit annoying is I had real difficulty getting this free column layout, and it was difficult because I didn't really understand how the grid layout works, because the grid layout defines a 12 wide grid, so the whole screen is 12 grid wide. But up until now, my default size for groups used to be 6. So obviously, if you have 6, you can only fit 2. And I was trying to move them around, and I didn't understand why some of them are always wrapping in the next line. But then in the forum, I was just reminded that, hey, the grid is 12 unit wide. So if I want 3, it needs to be 4, 4, and 4. And you know, once I have done that, everything was working. So that was just a bit of learning for me. And the rest of it is, as you can see here, now I have 6 and 6 here, and this is 12 wide. So you can easily implement a screen where you have either 3, 2, or, you know, 6 basically groups next to each other. And on the top of these 3 are just a big V cards, so cards, and these are just tables, nothing special about them. And the only thing I've done here for these, I have hidden the group title, and so I'm using like an image on the top of the view. And I've done the most of this bulk work in the live session as well, but I was just tidying up here. So let me just go through the code again. And the whole editor is actually this much here, so it's not a big thing. And this one is the previous one, which is the UI builder, which I would probably remove. And the one here up is the actual engine. So this does all the engine stuff. And then it has a couple of things which I've already implemented in the previous dashboard 1.0. And also here we have logging, which also has a lot of code from dashboard 1.0, but then you can see all the new stuff here for, you know, 2.0 for the 2 new list views. So I'm going to include everything in the video, in the link, but then you can just remove the parts that you want. Maybe I will just remove the UI builder stuff, because I'm not going to use that anymore. Okay, so the main thing for the editor is actually very simple, because as you see up here, we have 3 templates. And so you have one template here, or maybe this much. So where you generate the rules, you display the rules, and based on what got clicked, whether you have selected any of these values or you clicked one of these buttons, then we have a big switch. And then it has all the handling logic, like, you know, disabling, moving the rule. And then some of them feed back to update the list, like, you know, moving and disabling the rule. But whenever I select something, then I select the rule, and then it displays the the details of the rule. So this is the next one. So well, that basically just does the selection, and then it displays the rule here. And then again, based on what you click here, again, you have two lists here and a bunch of buttons. Then there is a big selection, and it does again, logic of, changing the values. And then finally, once you have changed either a condition or an action, then it updates this view, which is all handled here. So there is one more template. And then when you change something and submit, then it updates the stuff in the database, or it sends a notification if something didn't work. Might just skip the first one because that was already discussed in the main topic. But all I'm doing here is just to remind you. So this is how the rules look like. So big list. The rule has a name, and then it has conditions, which again an array of objects. So here I'm just getting all this value from the context menu, and what I do is I go through and I create these subtitles, which you can see here. So it's the name of the conditions, and then the name of the type of the action. So it gives you like a preview of how this rule looks like. So it has a time and the data and the state conditions, and in the action section it has a control and the set state. And I generate all these small texts here because once all this information is passed to the template node, all I want to do is just display them. I don't want additional logic there. So this is where I dynamically generate the text. So it's just getting generated every time. If it's already exists, it just gets overwritten. And in the action state, I also create these subtitles which show up here and also here. So I just basically concatenate this piece of text, which becomes the, let's say, the title or the description of either the action or the condition. And I pass everything to the rule list, and this rule list it has changed because previously in the previous version I had the toolbar here, but I moved all the relevant buttons to the relevant nodes or templates. So it is still a big V card, which has a big cover image on the top of it, and then it has a toolbar, which is also inside this image header. So that's the toolbar. So that's the text, and that's the toolbar. So that's the image, and then it has the toolbar, and it has the text in the toolbar. So that's the rule list. And then also within the toolbar, aligned to the right, I have a list of buttons, and these buttons are encapsulated in a tooltip, which are getting displayed whenever I hover over the text or the button. So that's what you can see here. And so whenever the button is pressed, it just sends a message with the topic. The topic is something for the button, so refresh, enable rule, disable rule, and the payload is 0. So that's what is getting evaluated in the big switch node that you see after it. So I have all the buttons here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So 5 buttons. And after that, I have the card text, and within the card text, I have a vlist. And that vlist is getting populated by the items. And whenever I select any of the item, I get a message which selected and the item in the payload. So the topic selected. And I have a custom icon. So again, whether the item is enabled, then I either display this bell or this bell cancelled. So these icons here. So the list looks like it has a prepend icon, and of course it has a list title. And the list item, the items are actually the payload. And that's it. Yep. So as I said, if you click any of the buttons or anything, then it is sent out as a message with a different topic that you can see here. So based on what the topic is, I have different handles. And I've already done the enable, disable rule and the move rule in the previous video. So there's nothing like that. I mean, I'm just, moving stuff in the array. and or I'm just setting the disable or the enable flag, nothing else. And once that is done, the message goes back to here just to refreshes the rule. So it just, you know, saves the changes in the context and then rereads the context and then sends the update to the list back. And that's how the list is updated if I move the rules around. So for example, if I move this guy down, he moves down. Move it back up, it moves up. And if I did refresh or select, it is, I thought the refresh goes back to refresh. Oh, is null, sorry, that's the null, that's when nothing happens. Okay, so the next one is when I selected something from the list. So then the second template needs to be updated. And I think that was also working in the previous video. Again, the only thing I have done is I have moved the icons inside from the toolbar. So here we, select the, we look at if the topic is selected, then something got selected, and I look at the the payload because that contains the selected items. And then what you would also notice that also in the beginning of this rule list, I start creating IDs. So here, when I do this loop to update the subtext or the title, I also add the loop value to an ID attribute, or so I have ID 0, ID 1, ID2. So this doesn't come from the initial data set, but it gets dynamically generated all the time, because that's how I can reference what comes in the payload against the main object which is stored in the context. So you can see that so the payload ID, that's the ID of the selected either action or condition. And I can just bring it from the rules which is stored in the context as well. And same here, I generate the subtitles for the rules and the actions. And what else? I mean, this has been a while since I did it. And I also prepared these names that I mentioned. Actually, this is here, not on the previous function. But I'm just creating a lot of text which gets updated or displayed on the screen. And I pass all of it to the rule details. So it's this one. And what you see here, this also a huge vcard. And the other thing I've done is, I think in all my previous examples, I used an attribute which is called the max width, and I set it to a certain pixel value. But here what I said is the width is 100%, so it fills up all the available space within the group. So here, you see it fills up the entire group. The only reason you don't see double lines, because in the theme I disabled the group outline. So now only the vcard the renders an outline. So you see here, you just don't see any outlines here. That's just because I just played around with the theme. So that's 100%. It has a cover image. It has also a toolbar, which in this case it only has a text, which is the name of the rule. So you see that updates every time I select something. And subtitle is a subtitle, so that's again getting generated, which shows what is the whether the rule is enabled and what is the operator. So that's the two parameters which I said I didn't implement an editor for, but probably I should. And within the vcard we have vcards. So there is one big vcard here. But then it has, it has three vcards. Maybe you can slightly see that this border curves back here, and then another border starts. So that's one vcard, and then the condition is a vcard, and the action is a vcard. So this line is hardly noticeable, but there is a little bit of line there. So in the second vcard, we don't have a cover image, but we start with a toolbar, and this toolbar looks exactly the same as the one that I used before. So it has a an icon, and if it's clicked, then it again just sends an empty payload with a specific condition that I can check later. And I have tooltips, and I also have these activator props, which I don't think I use anymore. So this template activator, I used this previously in order to disable some of these buttons, but I'm not using this functionality anymore, but probably just left there from copy and paste. And it has a card text, which is the name of the condition. No, it just says conditions. That's the card text. Oh, sorry. The card text is actually the vlist, which shows me, well, in this case, the 3 conditions that I have. And again, similar to this, each condition has a prepend icon and a text. So it has a prepend icon, and the text is the title is the item.text. And yeah, that's it. And then I have another vcard which has exactly the same structure. So it has a toolbar with a bunch of buttons, and yeah, the toolbar title is actions. So here the condition, action, and the conditions are the toolbar titles. A bunch of buttons, and then again a vlist which has the title of the item text and the prepend icon, which is, oh yeah, that's gets generated here down in the code below. So here the data is a little bit more complicated because the payload is a big object. It has a name, which is the rule name. It has a subtitle, and it has 2 arrays. One is the conditions, and the other one is the actions. And here you can see that the vlist for the actions is the actions, and the vlist for the conditions is the conditions. So I define them conditions, actions is 2 empty array by the in the beginning, and they get populated by these 2 lines here. So the payload message.payload, the conditions go into the conditions, the message.payload, those actions goes into the actions. And I have a couple of methods to determine the different icons for the various action types and condition types. So you can see them here, and that's it. So they just you know, it's basically 2 lists which populates, or 2 arrays which populates these 2 lists, and a few more dynamic values, which is here and then here. And the same thing applies here. In the condition list, you have all these messages coming out based on what you have selected and which button you pressed. And you can see here there's either you have condition and action, so that's when either you selected a condition or an action, or you selected any of the buttons above. The move condition and the move actions and the delete condition and the delete action is pretty much the same as the moving the rules around. It's just handling an array, you know, setting, moving items up and down in an array, nothing complicated. And the deletion is again a little bit more, I mean, that's not complicated either, because you have just, you know, delete editor.action. So it's not complicated again. Yeah, and then moving on, it gets a little bit more complicated, because then when you select the either the action or the condition, then it needs to render this editor. And I thought that's going to be very difficult, but actually it's ended up being a little bit easier. So that's something which didn't exist in the previous video. So let me just cover in a little bit more detail. So what you see here on the top of these handling routines, that it says if the message.topic is undefined. So these are all the cases where you, like, I click something here to select a washing machine, then this updates, and then every time any of these screens update, you will see that in the watch function, so in the message function, I check if the payload is not undefined, so we are getting a valid, you know, payload. It's not like an empty something. And then we get the data out of it and update the various local variables here, which are linked to any of the screen elements. And at the end, there is always this send payload undefined, which sends out an empty payload. And I don't remember the exact reason, but in the forum it was mentioned that that's a good practice to do this in order to not resend the same value again in certain cases. And I forgot, but yeah, I think that's a good practice, and this is what I started doing as well. So here on the in this code as well, so you can see that every time the topic is null, then that information still goes into this handle thing. So that's when the topic is undefined. So this is when the previous template got updated. So this should remove all of its entries. So I just pass a payload which doesn't contain any data. So the title is empty, the and all these everything is empty and false. But when we have a condition selected or an action selected, we need to display an editor. And then what I do here is I send out a message which has a title that I'm editing the condition text or the action text, and I have three variables which says the condition, whether the condition editor is true or false, so whether it's visible or not, or whether the action set editor is true or false, or the action control editor. So all the conditions are look exactly the same, so they don't need a separate editor, but the actions they have separate fields. So there is a separate action for set state, and there is a separate separate editor for set state and a separate editor for control. So I control which one should be displayed, and I either pass the condition that needs to be edited or the action that needs to be edited. Okay, that's fairly simple. And actually it was fairly simple to handle on the UI as well. So here, that's the UI for this, like that. And actually what you see here is, this is a, multiple vCards on top of each other. So we have one vCard which displays the image and the toolbar. So this part here. And I had to pause for a couple of hours and I lost my thought. So what I was trying to say is that, so we have these, so we have three vCards, one for the condition editor, one for the action control editor, and one for the action state editor. Again, on the conditions, it's always the same fields. There is a trigger, there is an operator, and there is an operand or value, basically. Where is it? It's here. Trigger, operator, operand, value. Sorry, it's 4. And then you have a button. So like that, yeah. And then I specified the drop-down values and the operators, less than, greater than, equal, and then the rest you just type it in. And there, as I said, there is no validation, but it would be very easy to add validation because of the you can add, like, I think for the the V text field, you can add like a validation thingy, and it would just appear under it. So I could, basically what I could do is, when I click on the update condition, and if it fails, then I feed the data back with an additional field which shows the validation error. So if that exists, then it would just appear, and if it doesn't exist, then nothing would happen. So I could definitely do that, and maybe just have a warning, like if this one got misspelled, then it would have a warning. But I didn't want to add a hard validation, because maybe you want to specify something, let's say in the actions, which doesn't exist yet, because this rule hasn't executed yet. But yeah, so that's one option that I could do in the future. So, and then everything here, so you see this vCard and this vCard, it also has this v-if condition. So that basically just says that this vCard only appears if this value is true, and that's the value that I'm sending it through. And also you can see that there is a condition editor, action set, state editor, action control editor. So they false by default. And then as the data comes in and some of them is true, then the card would just appear. So it's very easy to create or use one template which actually, you know, creates or implements multiple multiple you know, inputs or screens, or in this case forms. You just paste them in either vcard or something else, some other placeholder element, and then you just use the vif, and that would automatically hide and enable them. What else? Yeah, and at the end it has a button which says, you know, action change, condition changed, and then it just obviously puts in a payload, the action, the condition, so whatever we are changing. And because these things are, you know, tied together here, it would just send the values that got manually updated. So you see one for the action editor, one for the other action editor, and that's it. So I mean, it is actually very simple to do, and you can see that there is nothing really in the code. So I just defined all these variables here in the data section. I assign them from the payload, and you know, if for some reason the payload doesn't contain this information, I can just default them to either false or an empty array, empty object, and that's it. And I think we have this get icon and get icon condition and get condition icon, get action item. That's just a copy paste from the previous. It's not being used here, and that's it. So once it is done, then I handle the update. Basically, if it was a condition change, then I get the ID from the from the payload, because that also contains the ID, and I can look it up and then just update it, you know, save it in the context, and that's it. I just said a message update successful. So let's say if you do this one and then you want to change this to, let me play around with the ones which I have not. So if you want to change that, yeah, condition updated. Okay, and what I decided to do is just to, you know, once you exit, then this clears sort of like visually feedback that, you know, it's been updated, and now when you reread it does 12. It shows now the new updated value. And again, I do this by sending you know, it sends an empty payload, and that empty payload so when I submit this, it updates, then the information goes back to the rule selection, so that updates this central template. And then when it receives a data, then again this also sends out an empty payload. So here you see this send payload undefined or undefined payload, and then when this undefined payload is received, then again it sends a further message through to the third one, which then basically just, as you can see, is false, false, false. It just clears everything, and that makes this thingy disappear. So I could have done it another way, again assuming that something got just updated. Maybe I could have passed this information through, but anyway, I thought this is, you know, a good enough option. And here you can also see that we have a V card, which is basically just this cover image and a little bit of placeholder here, and then there it curves in, and then this other V card starts. So again, that's how I stack multiple V cards on top of each other in this template node. And what else? Then nothing really happens here. So I just do the submit, and the action change is the same. And you know, sometimes I throw up errors if I'm missing an ID, or it shouldn't really happen because I make sure that I always delete everything when I, you know, if the first one updates, then the second one clears and the third one clears. So with that way, I clear everything. But again, if some of the information is not ready, it would send a different type of message. And that's it. I don't think that is anything else here that I wanted to discuss. I have this empty message here as well, so that when the rule list refreshes, then it clears the middle one. So if I refresh this one, that gets cleared and that gets cleared as well. Yeah, and probably the other thing I wanted to say is that here I implemented the add condition, and that just basically creates a new object with all the empty values. I just put in like this condition value, so at least I have something to show. And probably I could have, I think I probably do the same with the rule list. So I would create an empty rule with one condition and one action, so at least the UI have something to display. So I mean, technically I need to fit 2 more buttons here, which is the delete and the new. I think I have just the space to do that. And this still works if I mean, it doesn't work awfully well if I resize it. As you can see, to some extent it can accommodate the smaller space, and then it starts, you know, truncating the title. But again, I think it's best used in full screen, and probably in mobile you will start, you know, putting all these you know, one under each other, so it makes it less, you know, visually easy to use. But I think it's more, you know, like a desktop viewer, like a desktop UI. So that's that, and the rest of it in, well, besides the editor, I have this data list, and that goes up to the main flow wherever data is being received. Here you can see that with a 5-second delay. The only reason I'm putting in this delay because that might impact or generate some other triggers, and it would just update the data, update some of the other fields. So I put a 5-second delay, which, I mean, it could really be 1 second. And I convert this data cache, which contains all the current, you know, data points, statuses and everything. And I just push this out into a different, basically into an array. So the data cache is, yeah, as you can see, I opted for this format where the ID of the data is the attribute. So it's not an array, but it's like a big object, like a nested object. But I have no idea how to display this format in a table, so I basically just convert it to a simple array. And then I push this out into a template node, which so these two formatted for 1.0, dashboard 1.0, and this is the dashboard 1, which is basically just a Barebone table. It doesn't have any details. It just I added a search, so in case I have a lot of things, then it's easier to find the ones that I need. But you see, there's nothing else. It's just the Barebone, you know, table. And so that's this one here. So that just automatically gets updated whenever I receive new data, and then hence that may also update one of the states as well. And then I have the 2 status ones. And the only thing I want to show here is, I don't want to go into the details on what the state does because that's already discussed. But here I started, you know, stripping down the UI table to how simply I can get it if I just want to display something, if I don't need additional formatting or anything else. So here again, I have stripped down the UI table into this basic form where you just specify that it's a, you know, it's a vData table, and then it receives the payload, the items from the payload, and it receives the headers from message.headers. So basically, in the message.headers, I specify what headers I want to use. So I can, you know, push in any payloads, and then anything which is not included in the headers would just get ignored. Because if you don't do that, it would just start displaying all the fields, which could be annoying if it has some technical fields or some, you know, data fields that you don't want to show. And the message payload just needs to contain an array of objects which has all these fields. And you can see the script is completely empty, and then I just added this search because, you know, it just makes it easy to search for something. I mean, everything here is the same, so I don't know what I can search for. 16. Oh, that's 16. 12. Okay. So anyway, and So you push the data through, and I just added this change node where I specify the message.headers. And you know, it's simple. You specify the title of the column and the attribute which is in the payload. So, and then you can do sortable. So you see the sorting icon appears. Why didn't you do sortable for, I should have set it, the time as sortable as well, but I didn't do it for the message. So again, it's, you know, it's very simple, because again, you can just copy and paste this change node and the template node, and then you update the change node with all the fields, you know, when you are reusing these two components for a different set of data, and it cannot be easier than that. So that's a good idea that I started using here, and there is another flow which I started working on, and I did the same there as well. So it's very good. I really like it. And that's it. That basically concludes all this rule editor stuff. And yeah, and I think at some point, maybe another 6 months, I would add these missing functions here. So add, delete, and the validations. But I think even like this, it is pretty much usable. So with this with this video, I think I'm just probably going to include the entire flow here. I will delete this section here, which is the UI builder. I will not complete that one. Probably I will just save it for reference if I need it in the future. Then I can just move these things a little bit, you know, to be more compact, less space. But that basically is the main rule engine, which is the logic, and then a little bit of UI, which displays the rule list, sorry, the data list, which is here. Again, you can delete these two if you don't want to use dashboard 1.0 anymore. And then this section here, it's the rule editor, basically these three up here. And the logging section down here is all the logging infrastructure, which logs the messages. And again, it has two sets of nodes here for the UI. So these template and so these two templates are for dashboard 1.0, and these two with the headers and these are for dashboard 2.0. So again, at some point I would just delete these two, probably after I export. So I'm not going to use dashboard 1.0 anymore, but I leave both of the options there for you, in case you want to use it. I mean, you know, dashboard 1.0 still works. It's just not going to get updated, but you know, it's still a nice, and maybe in some extent it's an easier to use. It has less, you know, features. So for that reason, I think it's a little bit easier. But I'm quite happy with dashboard 2.0, and I want to use that in the future. So I think that will be pretty much all for the automation engine, and probably that's going to be the last video for a while. And again, if you want to look at the entire history, I will put the links in the cards. If I don't forget, I add them to the video description as well, but it's definitely going to be in the cards. So I think that will be all for today. Thanks for watching, and hopefully see you next video.